creepy government organization, police corruption, demonic entities running around the town, a general sense of distrust and paranoia. You know what it is that I'm describing? Go on. Let's say it together. 3, 2, 1. Rock Springs, Wyoming. And this also perfectly describes the analog horror we're going to be discussing today, called Dreams of an Insomniac, which is exactly why you should click the link down in the description and watch it for yourself. I promise you, it's well worth it. Now, let's get started with the breakdown. Volume 0. Your name is Tommy Merrick. While visiting a family home, you stumbled across a strange box of tapes in the attic. Out of curiosity, you decided to watch them on your old CRT. You think they might be haunted. Look, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be that old horse again, but isn't this how every analog horror series starts off? Shit, this kind of makes me want to crawl around in my attic a little bit. I don't know what's up there. While watching the tapes, you begin to see and hear things that weren't meant to be there. For some reason, they felt oddly familiar to you. And so, this is how Dreams of an Insomniac begins, and we are then immediately shown a haunted Halloween PSA. Here, an old news broadcast starts to play, and we are informed of the most heinous of crimes. Someone apparently broke into the local Halloween store and flipped everything upside down, only for it to be revealed that the only thing they stole was one of the Halloween costumes. Conveniently enough, the culprit wasn't caught on security cameras either. Then again, this was the 1980s. This part here is basically just an interview with a skeptical citizen who, to quote directly, thinks the whole thing is a bunch of malarkey. He did it. He did it. It was him. Before the clip ends, we are told not to trust anyone seen wearing the stolen Halloween costume at night. Without even giving us enough time to process what just happened, a news broadcast cuts in. Starting at 6 a.m. and continuing for exactly 1 hour, several children in the area randomly went missing. Here we can see an interview with a first-hand witness of the encounter named Alex Williams. Keep this guy in mind for later. Oddly enough, the photos of the missing children that are shown are heavily distorted. We are told that the culprit was wearing the orange costume you see on the screen, which sounds strangely similar to the one that was stolen from the Halloween store. I'm sorry, I just love the idea of a guy who breaks into a Halloween store and steals a Halloween costume for the sole purpose of committing crimes. I mean, he's literally a Gotham villain. He's literally the Joker. I'm not exaggerating that to you. In this next clip, a man by the name of Officer Kruger expresses extreme sadness over the crimes and promises to bring the criminal to justice. Right as his image fades away, if you look very closely, you can see that it's superimposed on top of another image that looks very skeletal. They got him. God damn it, they got him, boys. At this point, we can see security footage of what appears to be the Halloween store from before. The lights turn on their own, but nothing else suspicious is seen on the camera for a few moments. Then suddenly, all hell breaks loose. In the next frame, we can see that the lights were cut off and items were either thrown or damaged. In the final frame... well, I think we all know who that is. It's the Joker, baby. Here we learn that this image matches the fan art made for the East Ridge Demon. In the next scene, we get a much anticipated and admittedly not very surprising update on Officer Kruger. Apparently, he encountered the demon and is recovering from all its ill effects. Here it seems they are finally able to interview that son of a gun. Well, I'll be damned. Let's see what information this guy is willing to share with us.
Physical contact with a demon is incredibly dangerous. Following his encounter with this creature, Officer Kruger had developed severe physical abnormalities which are still being treated to this day. The most significant of these abnormalities include discoloration of the skin.
glad to see that he's recovering. Overall, the main thing that you should gather from this tape is that the East Ridge demon will girl boss, gaslight, gatekeep, and repeat. Don't touch him because his fingers smell like onion powder and lard. In all seriousness though, to read directly from the list here, here are some of the things to be aware of. The demon will attempt to take advantage of you when you are most vulnerable. Do not be fooled by the demon's hallucinations. Do not let the demon make any physical contact. And lastly, do not make any attempt to communicate with the demon. It will steal your voice. The next part of the video shows us a Halloween PSA, presumably regarding the demon fiasco. The rules of the season, presented by Dr. Linkman. Some of the safety measures put in place to protect the local community are a curfew of 6 p.m., locking doors and windows. You do not hear the knocking at your doors and windows. If you hear anyone outside your door or window, don't fucking answer, you little shit. The smiling snatcher is wearing their skin as a fashionable suit. And lastly, don't trust any fucking person that you see in this suit, okay? Okay, yeah, we get it, okay? Way to make the smiling snatcher feel self-conscious about its fashion choices. I mean, shit. No wonder he's trying to switch it up a little bit by wearing people's skin, and yet you guys still criticize him for it. So judgmental. Let the guy live. My lips are getting a little pasty. Hold on. There we go. Don't want the smiling snatcher to snatch my beautiful, crispy, thin lips. We're cutting that part out. The next entry in the series is a memorial for Officer Kruger mentioned in the previous video. And the malarkey guy makes his return. Like Christ himself, he descends from the heavens to once again remind us that this is indeed a bunch of malarkey. Foreshadowing. Suddenly, the man behind the camera interjects, stating something along the lines of, "Hey pal, we're trying to make a news story here. You think anyone's gonna believe this?" Essentially revealing that this entire bit was scripted. But for what reason? We're not entirely sure. The tribute to Officer Kruger commences, and we are forced to reminisce about the good times by staring at his corporate-ass smile. According to the tribute, he tragically unalived himself by hanging himself in his son's closet. Why that choice? I'm not encouraging this. I'm just saying, why your son's closet? Did you want him to, like, play with your corpse like a fucking piñata? Is that what... Never mind. This is already pretty confusing though, because in the last episode, if you guys remember, he was alive. He was at a treatment facility being, I guess, treated for the demon sickness, if you will. So this is a bit perplexing. And we'll get into that shortly. Here we can see the letter that he supposedly left behind for his son, which is, God, it's really fucking hard to read. Fuck, if anyone wants to translate these Egyptian hieroglyphics, well, be my guest, because I'm not gonna fucking do it. God damn it. As the tribute concludes, it provides a distorted phone number and advises those with mental illness to call if they need help. Suddenly, it starts to glitch, changing to the words, "You are alone. This place will be your tomb." Glowing red eyes turn to gaze at the viewer before we get a lovely message from the Crookster himself.
Help. Please help me. I just want to die. Why won't you let me die?
Because I still have use for you yet.
Notice how here in this clip, the year of his death changed from 1987 to 1996. More on that later. The third tape in our series, titled Family Photo Album, is designated for Foundation personnel only. And I can only know from years of experience that anything that looks like this cannot be trusted. On the night of January 6, 1987, the ECPD had received a phone call from a distressed man reporting that something was trying to break into his home. Upon the dispatcher's arrival, he, as well as anyone else who may have been living in the house, were reported missing. The only evidence that could be found at the scene of the crime were a photo album, as well as a camcorder, which seemingly contains footage of the events which transpired on that night. Family photo. Upon opening the album, detectives were baffled to find all the photos within were horribly distorted. This made it incredibly difficult to identify the people depicted. When detectives police questioned neighboring residents about the identity of the family in the photos, none were able to provide any useful information. One resident went as far as to say that no family has ever lived in that house. It's an inside job. And the malarkey guy is in on it. I don't know how, but he just is. I just know this for a fact. It was like they never existed. And believe me, you're gonna wish they never existed after you see this part.
Sammy? Sammy, is that you? I'm right here, Sammy. You're gonna have to help me though, honey. I can't find you.
While the culprit behind these disappearances remains a mystery. What's with this comically large ghost that we keep seeing here, huh? I'm betting it's either Kruger or the malarkey guy hiding behind that sheet. Someone's got to be hiding behind the mask. I'm honestly just expecting them to reveal that it's the two of them hiding under the same sheet. You know, you got one guy riding on the other guy's shoulders. Several photos in the album, as well as the 911 call made that night, suggest that they may not be human. In the next recording found on the CRT, the father can be seen running in the snow. When he's back at his house, he makes a phone call to 911. He explains how the demon is trying to get into his house and that it took his family. Now it's going to take him too. Suddenly, a golden light fills the room. He asks, "Why do you keep using faith?" Presumably because the demon is wearing the skin of one of his loved ones. The demon rather bluntly says that he has nothing left, an empty man, sitting in an empty home. But you don't have to be. They're still here, inside. And by the way, the voice actor for this demon thing sounds dangerously similar to one of the kids from Skinamarink, which just makes it so unsettling and creepy. They scream your name. They miss you. Come to me and you will never be alone again. Now this man has to be under the influence because instead of, I don't know, not fucking listening, he just gets up and walks towards the demon. That right there is a true American that don't got nothing to lose. By the time the cops get there, nothing is left but the old photo album. Never mind what I said earlier. If I were the dad, I'd probably just open up the window and let that guy sleep on the couch. The final entry in our series commences, and you know it's going to be good because the first scene got that Animal Planet 2005 drip. Our protagonist introduces himself as Alex Williams, and he's about to lay it out to us. He's an employee at the Linkman Foundation and a whistleblower, it seems. He was employed at the foundation the day it was created, and after the Halloween incident, he was put under 24/7 witness protection because the information he had was too valuable. Apparently, they only hired him at the foundation as a form of protection. Ouch. If you guys don't recognize him, this is the same guy that was interviewed in Volume 0. He was the guy that was there when the children first went missing. He goes on to say that neither he or anyone else employed by the facility knew what the fuck was going on. All they told him was that they were helping Veldigan villagers. Suddenly, the tape is interrupted and we are force-fed corporate bullshit from the Linkman Foundation. This little fellow is a cartoon version of the man himself, Linkman. He's here to give us the company history we never asked for. He explains how 4 years ago, the town was infested by a species of demon known as the Veldigan. Keep in mind, while he's describing these Lovecraftian horrors, he's doing so in a very over-the-top, cartoonish voice. Kind of sounds like my videos. A little bit, doesn't it? He then states that the founder of the company, Herbert Linkman, created the foundation to contain the threat and help treat everyone affected by it. Thanks to a generous inheritance from his father, Linkman was able to do so by renovating and reopening the Linkman Asylum, implying that his family has been in the asylum industry long before any of this stuff happened. In doing so, he has donated large sums of money to the local police department. If this does not reek of police corruption, I don't know what does. The ad abruptly ends and we can now listen to a recording of a phone call made to the police department on April 6, 1990. We are told this tape is the only surviving copy of the call and all other copies are to be purged. To give a very brief summarization, a woman calls into the police department explaining how men with bandages all over their faces and goggles are trying to break into her house, and when she makes this abundantly clear to the 911 operator, he just hangs up the phone. Back to Animal Planet, yay! Here he goes over how everyone on staff was overtrained for basically everything because, well, there were rules for basically everything. The strangest of them being that they had to wear goggles at all times while in the facility so as to avoid visual and auditory hallucinations. I'm not sure how goggles would help prevent auditory hallucination. Wouldn't you need, I don't know, AirPods for that or something? I don't know. These goggles were also used to keep patients in line. He explains how for some reason all of the patients were scared of staff members and they could hear music playing somewhere in the facility. While everyone else ignored these suspicious occurrences, Alex didn't. The footage glitches again, and an instruction tape starts to play. Here it explains how a hallucinatory environment is intentionally used on the patients at the asylum to control their behavior, as well as to hide certain things from them. The footage also explains how the red goggles help employees see past these hallucinations and perform their jobs correctly. These are the hallucinations that might occur should the goggles be removed. Warping of the environment around you, entryways and exits appearing and disappearing, seeing people that do not exist, and symptoms of auditory hallucinations, the voices of people that do not exist, distant, discordant music, the voice of Dr. Linkman, the knocking of doors and windows. Last but not least, don't interact with the caretakers. Just don't. Just shut the fuck up. Unsurprisingly, Alex doesn't have anything good to say about the caretakers. He just lets them have it, quite frankly. They are, in his own words, tall, bandaged people dressed in black from top to bottom that were never seen out of uniform. He always saw these people going into patients' rooms and taking them to unknown places throughout the facility. He ignored all of this until they brought in the same woman from the 911 recording. A woman in her 30s with absolutely no symptoms and nothing seemingly wrong with her. The woman starts screaming like an old goat. He sees the caretakers dragging her out of her room by her arms and legs while she flails around helplessly. Right as he was about to stop them, one of his co-workers holds him back, telling him it isn't worth it. Alex ain't having none of it though, cause he's fucking pissed! When his co-workers refuse to help him, he turns to the woman that he saw getting dragged out of her room. In the following clip, he begins his interrogation with her. After explaining what his intentions are to the woman agrees to answer some questions. He asks why the woman was brought there, and she doesn't know. Apparently, the caretakers just broke into her home and kidnapped her for seemingly no reason. Alex then asks where they took the woman, and here she gets noticeably more afraid. She says that she doesn't know still, and that if she told Alex, someone said that they were going to take her back to the room. Alex assures her that she won't go back to the room and that he just needs to know where the room is. She says they took her to room 66. Alex is befuddled, gobsmacked if you will, for there is no room 66 in the building. Before he can connect the dots, this shit happens.
No, that's not possible. There's only...
It's him!
Just try.
He's going to take me back now! Please don't take him back!
He isn't going to take
Don't let him take me back! Don't let him take me back!
Wait for a moment, don't...
Just what do you think you're doing?
Alex says that after all of that, everything was a blur. The caretakers dragged the woman out of the room before she could react. He never saw her again. Even more oddly enough, they just sent him back to work afterwards, like nothing ever happened. At this point, Alex is stumped until he decides to watch the interrogation tapes again. That's when he realized that there was a camera in the room the whole time, and yet somehow he didn't see it physically. That's when he had the brilliant idea. He thought to himself, you know what? You know, why don't I just take off these stupid fucking goggles? So that's what he does, and a magical new world is revealed to him. Just kidding, everything looks exactly the same. I love the fact that this organization supposedly has all these super top secret things that they're trying to hide from the employees, and the only thing that they do to make sure this information doesn't get out is by telling them to wear some cheap-ass goggles. What the fuck did you think was gonna happen, Linkman? You son of a bitch. He goes into the asylum later that night with a camcorder and no goggles, and here he finds room 66. He opens the door, and this is what he finds.
Help me!
Looks like someone wandered somewhere they aren't supposed to be.
In that moment, cornered and alone, I finally understood what they were so afraid of. I was finally seeing what they were seeing. For the first time, I saw his face.
If you noticed during those few frames with Dr. Linkman's beautiful face, you might have noticed clippings from a document that appears to be describing some sort of surgical procedure. More on that later. And then after witnessing the equivalent of a Benadryl fever dream, Alex, he just fucking leaves. He just fucking leaves like nothing ever happened. Seriously, Linkman just tells him to get the fuck out and clock back in. What a Chad. Common Linkman W, am I right? Everything went back to normal after that. Until now. Alex is afraid that soon he will be taken out. He's been followed by strange cars, and he's seen people stalking him out of the corner of his eye. And now the other staff members pretend he doesn't exist. He tells us that they've made him research someone very dangerous, and he's afraid that once he tells them what they need to know, they won't need him anymore. He knows things about said person that Linkman doesn't. And after interviewing said person, we may never hear from him again. After wrapping up the recording, he tells us that he left us a bunch of secret company tapes that contain all of the skeletons in Linkman's closet. If Alex doesn't come back, it's up to us to spread that information. One more thing. There's a little story, a little nursery rhyme in the description that I want all of us to read together. After watching the collection of the tapes you knew... I'm not gonna read it in that voice. After watching the collection of tapes, you knew what you had to do. Late that night, you left your home, hitching a ride with a taxi and making your way towards that place you saw in the tapes. How did you know where it was? You didn't know what to expect when you arrived there. For all you knew, it may not even be around anymore. The thought of what you might see there terrified you, but filled with a new purpose, you marched towards it regardless. Your driver dropped you off far from your destination, not wanting anything to do with where you told him you were going. And so you walked. For hours, you walked along a pathway of dirt and gravel, passing through a part of the county that felt like a ghost town. It had been so long since you stepped foot here, yet everything felt so familiar. The moon loomed high overhead when you finally arrived at your destination, the Linkman's Asylum. The place was now boarded up and abandoned, a husk of its former self. You stood in front of the entrance to it for what felt like an eternity. You knew what you had to do there, but you didn't have the strength to do it. Eventually, the dread became too much to bear, so you turned away and got ready to walk all the way back. But then you heard something. A bellowing, calling to you from deeper in the woods, the forest, if you will. The wilderness, if you would. The tree line, if you would rather. You recognized the creature's call and moved beyond the asylum as you ventured into the forest to meet someone you never thought you'd see again. Ah, yes. Nothing soothes the soul more than a calm, gentle bellowing from an old friend. Now, of course, I'm going to have to point out the very obvious here. The elephant in the room, am I right? It's heavily implied in the second entry to the series through that unreleased interview footage with the malarkey guy that someone was trying very hard to cover up the series of events that was taking place. Also, I can't ignore the fact that Officer Kruger supposedly unalived himself in 1987, but for some reason the actual year of his passing is 1996. And of course, it must be pointed out that the Linkman Foundation is for some reason donating large amounts of money to the local police department while 911 operators are hanging up on people. I said it before and I'll say it again. I believe that there's hush money being spread around. I believe there is media and police corruption taking place at the hands of the Linkman Foundation, of course. It's dirty money. What else is new? And of course, I also believe that this has something to do with the fabrication of Kruger's death. Someone doesn't want the people to know what actually happened to the guy. Perhaps he knew something that the Foundation didn't want getting out. Linkman, he just said, as this seems to be a very common theme with this whole story, right? Hence why he ended up as a patient at the Linkman Asylum. And I believe that the same is true for the woman that made the 911 call. I mean, there's just no other reason for her being there other than the fact that she knew too damn much, right? I can't help but appreciate the fact that the number 6 is just featured so often in this series, you know? Like, get it? 666, the devil, Satan. Now, at this point, you're probably asking yourself, what's with this Linkman guy, huh? What's his deal? What's his problem? Well, it's unclear what his character's purpose is. Based on Alex's finding in room 66, however, I believe these so-called patients of his are being experimented on, and possibly being offered up as human sacrifices when there's no longer any use for them. I mean, why else would there just be a giant demon standing in the supply closet of the Linkman Asylum? There's just no other reason for that. I also find it interesting how when we are finally shown Linkman's face, there are those, I guess, document clippings that briefly appear on the screen for a second, and they seem to be describing some sort of surgical procedure, which is why I lean more in the experiment direction for this one. Now, in the very last episode, after the viewer finishes viewing all the tapes, we get a little story in the description section, and if you remember, it seems that something all too familiar is calling out to us from the woods. But why? Perhaps we had our memories wiped because we too witnessed some things that we weren't supposed to see. I mean, oddly enough, a lot of this stuff seems very familiar to our character, the viewer, and it's never explained why. I think there's a reason for that. And as far as who the bellowing is coming from, I think it could either be the giant demon creature that we saw in room 66, or perhaps it's Alex himself. Only something is horribly wrong with him. He was transformed into a Sasquatch, a horrible monster. I'm just kidding. I honestly have no fucking idea who the bellower be. All in all, this story is still very much in development, and more will likely be revealed in future episodes. But I want to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comments if you would smash or pass Linkman. And as always, thanks for watching.